Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you to our witnesses today. Secretary Byrd, thank you for your testimony and for offering your perspective as the Chief Election Officer for a state that has long faced natural disasters during the fall election season. It definitely is a credit to the work of Florida's election officials that despite facing 3 hurricanes during the '24 election, Florida saw the highest voter turnout in 30 years. So my question is, how does your office guarantee the integrity of a displaced voter's ballot?
So this goes once again to being in communication with the elected supervisor of elections in that county and asking what their specific needs are. So for example, if there are a high number of displaced voters, we change some of the rules to allow a vote by mail ballot to be sent to the location where they were displaced, where typically that has to be, that request has to be in writing. We allowed them to call in and make that request of the supervisor. So that's one example. Once again, not just the people that are affected, but the people, the emergency responders, our first responders, our linemen, the people who are making sure that the power and safety, power comes back on and the safety, making sure that they are able to vote, because many of them come from counties where they could be able to vote, but now they're in the county that's been impacted.
Thank you. And when entire counties or localities must be evacuated, how do local election supervisors safeguard election infrastructure and supplies that are necessary to run polling locations?
Well, they're the real heroes. I mean, they're the ones who, they stay in their counties. I mean, I was on the phone with a supervisor of elections who had 3 feet of water in her home, but she was still doing her job. She was on the phone with us. And so once she made sure that all of her people were safe, I mean, her mission, she was elected to do that job. And they're staying, they're not evacuating. So they're staying in their county. They're going out as soon as it's safe to go to the polling sites to see which are still operable, which are down, and what we need to do to then get resources to get those sites back up and running.
Mr. Eggers, in your written testimony, you rightly point out that delaying or suspending elections should never be an option. As your office managed the aftermath of the storm that hit North Carolina, how did provisional ballots come into play during the '24 election, general election, when the western part of the state was heavily hit?
So part of the changes that we made related to the processing of ballots was to allow absentee ballots to be turned in other localities and locations. We were fortunately able to restore connectivity to the state, so that allowed counties to have their voter rolls accessible to them. So that minimized the need for provisional ballots in the various counties. I have noted in my statement that even if we lost all communications and a county needed to run an election, or a precinct needed to run an election with no communication, with no computers, with no documentation, that they could do so with pens, paper, and a place to store them, and ideally envelopes for provisional ballots, but really just pen and paper and a waterproof container can run an election in America.
Are there lessons learned from Hurricane Helene that you think will change the way certain practices will be implemented either before or after a natural disaster strikes?
Yes, in Western North Carolina, we're not used to hurricanes. We can handle a snowstorm, we're used to that, but when it came to a storm that destroyed all of our infrastructure, it really highlighted the fact that all of our communications are fiber optic and they are all land-based, and that we needed a backup system. And that's something that each of the counties simply did not have, to have a satellite phone such as Secretary Byrd has mentioned, and some of those practices. So I know we are looking at some of the things that Florida does as best practices so that we can implement those in North Carolina and prepare for natural disasters that we think wouldn't affect us.
Thank you for your testimony, and I yield back.